Have you ever looked at the Great Pyramid of Giza and just thought, how? How did an ancient civilization, without modern machinery, build something so massive, so precise, that it stood for over 4,500 years? It's one of history's greatest mysteries, and today, we're going to unravel it. While we don't have all the answers, a combination of incredible archaeological discoveries and clever historical detective work has given us a pretty clear picture. So, grab your virtual hard hat, and let's journey back to ancient Egypt to discover the secrets behind building a wonder of the world. First things first, you can't build a pyramid without stone, and lots of it. We're talking millions of blocks, each weighing an average of 2.5 tons. That's like 2 small cars. So where did all this rock come from? The bulk of the pyramid, the core, was made from local limestone quarried right near the Giza Plateau. This was convenient and practical. But the Egyptians were all about style too. For the smooth, gleaming outer casing that would have made the pyramids shine bright white in the desert sun, they wanted something special. They went to a place called Tura, across the river, to quarry a much finer, higher quality limestone. But what about the really important rooms inside, like the king's chamber? For those, they needed something incredibly strong. They sourced massive granite blocks from quarries in Aswan, which is over 500 miles south of Giza. Think about that for a second. Quarrying granite with simple tools is a monumental task in itself, let alone transporting it such a vast distance. So, how did they cut these gigantic stones? They didn't have steel or diamond-tipped saws. For the softer limestone, they used copper chisels and saws. Copper is relatively soft, so this was slow, hard work. For the tough granite, the process was even more grueling. Workers would painstakingly pound the rock with dolerite, a stone that's even harder than granite, to chip away at it. They also used an ingenious technique where they would drill holes into the granite, possibly with copper drills, and use sand as an abrasive to grind through the stone. It was a testament to sheer human persistence. Once the blocks were quarried, the next challenge was getting them to the construction site. This is where the Egyptians' mastery of their environment truly shines. The Nile River was their superhighway. An amazing discovery, a papyrus logbook known as the Diary of Mirror, gave us a first-hand account of this process. Mirror was an overseer who described how his crew transported limestone blocks from the Tura quarries. They would load the stones onto huge wooden boats and sail them down the Nile. They even engineered a system of canals to bring the boats right up to the base of the pyramid. It was a logistical marvel, a floating procession of stone moving towards its final destination. But what happened when the stones reached the shore? They still had to be moved across the sand to the pyramid. Dragging a multi-ton block on dry sand is nearly impossible. But the Egyptians had a clever trick, beautifully depicted in ancient tomb paintings. They would build large wooden sledges, place the stone block on top, and have teams of workers pull it with ropes. The secret ingredient? Water. An important discovery showed that they would pour water onto the sand directly in front of the sledge. This made the sand firm and reduced the friction dramatically, making it much easier to pull the heavy load. It's a simple but brilliant piece of physics that made the impossible possible. Alright, so the stones are at the site. Now for the million-dollar question. How did they lift these colossal blocks hundreds of feet into the air? This is probably the most debated part of the pyramid building process. The Egyptians hadn't invented the pulley or cranes as we know them. They had to rely on simple machines and an incredible amount of coordinated manpower. The most widely accepted theory is that they used ramps. But what kind of ramp? There are a few different ideas. The most straightforward is a long, straight ramp leading up one side of the pyramid. The problem is, to reach the top of the Great Pyramid, a ramp like that would have had to be over a mile long and would have contained more material than the pyramid itself. So that seems unlikely. Another popular idea is a spiral ramp that corkscrewed around the outside of the pyramid as it was being built. This would have been much shorter and required less material. It makes a lot of sense, allowing workers to deliver blocks to all sides of the structure as it grew. A more recent, and very intriguing, theory suggests the use of an internal ramp. In this scenario, a main external ramp would be used for the lower levels. But as the pyramid got higher, workers would haul the blocks up through a tunnel built just inside the pyramid's outer edge, spiraling upwards. This would explain why we haven't found remains of a massive external ramp. It might still be hidden inside the pyramid. Regardless of the exact design, the method was the same: teams of workers, using ropes, and sheer muscle would have hauled the sledges with the stone blocks up these massive inclines. There is another possibility, one mentioned by the ancient Greek historian Herodotus. He described a method using levers. Imagine a short wooden machine that could lift a block from the ground onto the first level. Then, another machine on that level would lift it to the second, and so on, all the way to the top. This step-by-step method would have been slower but would have required less infrastructure than a giant ramp. It is possible they used a combination of all these methods: ramps for the heavy lifting at the bottom, and perhaps levers for the final positioning of the stones higher up. So who were the people doing all this back-breaking work? For a long time, the popular image was of thousands of slaves being forced to labor under the whip. But modern archaeology has completely overturned that idea. The pyramids were not built by slaves. They were built by a dedicated, skilled, and well-organized workforce. We know this because archaeologists have excavated the villages where the workers lived. They found their bakeries, their breweries, and even their tombs. The skeletons found in the workers' cemeteries show that they were Egyptians. They suffered from work-related injuries like broken bones and strained backs, but their bones were properly set and healed, showing they received medical care. They were also well-fed, eating a diet rich in bread, fish, and beef, not the kind of food you'd give to a disposable slave workforce. This army of builders was likely made up of two groups. First, you had a core of permanent, skilled craftsmen, stonemasons, architects, surveyors, and toolmakers who worked on the project year-round. Then, you had a much larger rotating workforce of seasonal laborers. These were often farmers. During the annual Nile flood, their fields would be underwater and impossible to work. So they would come to Giza to work on the pyramid in service to their pharaoh, who they considered a living god. They were paid for their labor, often in the form of food, beer, and other supplies. Building the pyramid was seen as a national project, a form of civil and religious duty. The entire operation was a masterclass in project management. To complete the Great Pyramid in just 20 to 27 years, they needed incredible precision. The base is almost a perfect square, with the sides aligned almost perfectly to the cardinal directions: north, south, east, and west. This required sophisticated knowledge of astronomy and geometry. Everything, from coring the stone to feeding the workers to lifting the final capstone into place, required a level of planning and organization that is staggering to even think about. So the next time you see a picture of the pyramids, don't just see a pile of stones. See the ingenuity of the engineers who designed the ramps and canals. See the strength of the workers who pulled the sledges across the sand. See the skill of the masons who cut the granite with such precision. The pyramids are not just monuments of stone. They are monuments to human potential, organization, and the incredible things we can achieve when we work together towards a common goal. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey back in time. If you enjoyed learning about how the pyramids were built, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the greatest mysteries of history. Let me know in the comments what ancient marvel you'd like us to explore next. See you in the next video.